Today I'd like to talk about that ego thing again. As you know, when I was in the courtroom once, and also when I was in prison following the court situation, I found myself that I was stuck inside a definition, a sense of who I was, inside a very small box. In the courtroom itself, I heard the judge speaking and the solicitor and the prosecutor, all sorts of social inquiry reports and all that people were saying. And I came to a point as they were going on about these things, and I was thinking, you know, all this may be true at some level, but you don't know me. I know who I am, and I'm more than this, you know. In other words, in one sense, I'd been thinking, and what they thought, is I was inside this limitation. These were the parameters of my life. But really, deep inside, I knew I was much bigger than that, and I was much more wholesome than that. I just never had a chance, you know. And of course, as I've spoken on previous talks, I did have an experience at that time of who I really was on the inside. You know, the true me, which had never really had a chance. It's sort of been dominated by this mental idea of who I was, which crushed me down to about this big, you know. And this is something, that's an awful thing that can happen in life. One of the things that we have to realize in life when we talk about the limits of like an ego construct, creating a personality that is not true about ourselves, is it's only ever like a narrative. It's just ideas. You know, when I think back, I mean, I'm free, and I've been free for like 40 years in that respect. And when I think back to the way that I was before, it wasn't something real. It was just I was stuck in a narrative, things that I'd concluded about myself as I'd gone through my life, things that I thought, oh, you know, like, oh, I'm not good enough and I'm no good and bum, bum, bum. And it becomes like a narrative that goes on. And unfortunately, it becomes one that we get held to and we can't break out of. And what we need is something to shake us out of that, to make us realize, hey, there's something else going on, you know. I'm more than that. Because that more than that knowing that we're more than that and beyond that is the thing that breaks the limit. That's what does it, you know. And of course, you remember I talked about when I was doing therapy, in the last time I was in prison, did a lot of therapy, and during the therapy discovered that I was completely different in my inner reality than what people were encountering in me on the outside. You know, it was almost as if I was in there listening to this creation speak and act and behave, and thinking to myself, I never get a chance. The real me never gets a chance. This idiot, you know, has ruined my life, you know. And so all the potential was ruined and spoiled by this behavior pattern. Like I say, it was just a narrative. It was just an idea. But that's what happens, you know. Anyway, one of the things that I'd like to just include in this talk is the fact that when we're going through our lives, that narrative, what it is, it's like a record. And what I mean by a record, it's like these circles. These circles represent records, like songs that we hear on the radio. Years ago, they used to be discs, and we call them records. Why? Because they're recordings, all right? Now, on a jukebox, you can only play, there might be 15 songs on the jukebox itself, okay? And we used to go out and put money in the machine called the jukebox, and it would play the songs. But a jukebox can only play what's already inside of it. You can't play anything outside of it. So if this is the jukebox of your life, okay, and you're living according to what your narrative is about your life, then you won't be able to live beyond that. You're stuck with the record. And so what I'm trying to say is, and this is a thing that it's hard to understand, is we have emotional records. And so we might go for a job interview, or we might enter into a relationship, or we might think, I'd like to go to such and such a place, but I don't know. And that I don't know is a record that's telling you don't deserve it. Or the relationship that you're playing second fiddle in, like you're always subservient in the relationship, or you can't even hold it together properly. It's because of a record that keeps playing. And there's certain things that set these records off inside of us that create our behavior, which become almost like our personality. But it's not real. It's just a record from the past. Why can a record from the past have such a big say upon who we are today? But they do. But even though they do, and even though they're so strong and powerful, and I had that experience myself, there is a way of overcoming it. And there is a way of just leaving it behind. And I'd like to talk about some of those things, because this is where many of us are, and we need answers, don't we? Okay? So, one of the things that we need to understand is that the record that we had, the records that suddenly emotionally play, you know, and it take us on the roller coaster of, oh my God, you know, and so we fail to get through courses, or we fail in a relationship, or we fail to ever be who we know we really are. It all comes from the things we conclude about ourselves as we go through life. We can often say, oh, you make me feel like this, or you make me feel like that. But it's not true. Because all outside things and people can ever do is trigger off how you already have concluded about things inside yourself. I mean, you can blame them as much as you want, but really what they've done is they've touched, like the old saying, oh, touched a nerve, did I, you know. And it's true, they did touch a nerve. The nerve's in there already, and so we overreact to what the situation, overreact to what somebody might say because of the record that's already there. And so we get caught up in this limit of the past. And it's a sad thing, because the past doesn't exist except in the emotional record. Okay? A good example of this, come across this many times, is you get a child and their father's rejected them. In other words, the father's just not there, they've left. Or the father might be there and takes no notice of the child whatsoever. There's just a sense of coldness, there's just no connection with them whatsoever. And so it doesn't matter really what anybody else says. You say, oh, well, your dad was busy, he's got a busy job and he can't be here today and he can't be here tomorrow and he won't be here later on, and he's got important things to do, your dad, and he pays all the bills and all that. But you know, children have this funny way of like just developing this funny blank stare, you know. And what that is, see, is that the child is not just going to take on board words that come out of your mouth. What they take on board is what they come to believe. That they will conclude. So it might be wrong information that they're coming up with. That they will conclude. And what they also conclude is not about their father, it's not about their mother, or their cousin, or anybody else. It's about me. And what they say too often is, well, I suppose I'm just not good enough. I thought I was special, but I suppose I'm not that special. And that's a conclusion. It's there. And nobody really notices, because what we do is we get on with our lives, and the child starts to grow and change clothes, change length of their hair, do different hobbies, do this, do that and the other. But then when they get past adolescence, they sort of start getting into life. They might want to be in a relationship. Somebody might be interested, and people might say nice things about them, or they might want to step up a little bit in life. And then suddenly a record starts to play. And that record is a record that they concluded about themselves a long time ago. And people might be astounded and say, well, what's the matter? Why can't you get past this point? You know, it's a bit like my friend in the previous video who tried to pass his mountain leadership certificate, but nothing in the world outside of him stopped him, but something in him stopped him. I don't know what it was. But obviously a record started to play, pressure was on him, and something started to go on emotionally. And what he couldn't get past was not the course, not the mountains and the compass and the rocks and the difficulty and the physicality, nothing. Something within him was too difficult. He couldn't get past that. The next example I'd like to use was when I was in Borstal. Borstal was a very tough place. I made it really hard for myself. I was supposed to do about 8 months, 9 months. I did 21 months because I was so bad. And I probably deserved to do all those 21 months because I was out of control in those days. Anyway, long story short, there was an officer, one day, he took us out to play football on the yard and it was unscheduled. So I was kind of feeling good game of football. And but then he walked up and stood next to me sort of in a daydream, and he was smoking a pipe. he said, you know, last night I was watching the last night of the proms. And of course, the last night of the proms is the classical prom season that goes on in London every year. And it finishes off at the Albert Hall with the last night, and there's all sorts of banners flying and people throwing confetti everywhere and singing Land of Hope and Glory and all these things. And it really is a great spectacle. And to be there must be amazing. And he'd been watching this, you know, and he said to me, he said, oh, those wonderful, wonderful young British people, you know, they're playing the instruments and disciplined and educated, and the audience all dressed properly and all this, you know. I was listening, and he said to me, and then he said, unlike scum like you. It's like, wow. So he sort of lined it all up to like almost like slap me, you know. And the thing is in life, like I say, it's not so much what people say, but what we conclude about what they say. I mean, none of us are controlled by what people say. We're controlled by what we think. We're controlled by what we conclude. And so I thought at that time, much to my embarrassment, I thought to myself, scumbag. And I thought about all the times I've been locked up, all the trouble I've been in the fights and everything else. And I thought, well, yeah, he's probably right. And that's not good, is it? And so later on in life, when maybe I was trying to be in a relationship with somebody, which means they're going to find out more about who I really am. What are they going to find about who I really am? Well, they're going to find out that a record that plays, an emotional one that never goes away. And this is the thing, see, once you start concluding things, once you start making a record, you're making the record, not somebody else. You're making your own record about life, okay? Well, it's your record that starts to play. And the record can start to play and start to turn. All the emotions start to churn. So it's turning and it's churning. And what's it churning up? Well, you're not good enough. And you make an excuse to get out of that interview or pass that course like my friend did, or go to college, or be in the relationship, or go any further with it. Or always feel like you go, oh, this is going to fall apart, this is going to fall apart, because somewhere in your life you decided that everything always falls apart. You know, because of things that happened in your life, and you concluded that things always fall apart. But let's remember, that's an old record. That's not from today. It's not true. And the final one, just trying to give you 3 examples of different types of things, but the third one I'd like to give you is one of great hope. I was in prison and I got completely set free. I even said to them when the staff said, well, let's try and get you parole. And I said, well, I don't mind getting parole, but you know, I'm already free. I don't want to live my life in jail, but I am free. I've broken this thing that had held me. And what had basically happened was I'd gone from these sort of expectations. These were no longer the parameters of my makeup of my personality, my expectations, how far I might go. That was broken down completely, because that was just a narrative. It was just things. It wasn't real. It was a narrative that I'd sold myself, that I'd talked to myself about and become convinced about. And it became emotional. And of course, the emotional record would play. But it all became broken down because of the steps that I took to know who I really was. And who I really was way beyond. There was no limits. Nothing at all. Brilliant. In a short time after I'd sort of broken free, which is inexplicable. I wish I could just tell you exactly what that means so you could have it. But it's actually inexplicable. It's difficult. We all have to find these things for ourselves. But basically, shortly after that happened, I had a voice that, was it a voice? A massive, I call it knowing. That's why I called my second book Another Kind of Knowing, because we can find a knowing sometimes which is beyond understanding, it's beyond any mental ability to know how that can be. But this voice said to me, this knowing, I knew that all the doors in my life that had been closed to me had now been opened. What I mean is I could travel to other countries, I could have all sorts of experiences, because in my intelligence and my knowledge, I'd realised that with my criminal record and my terrible breaking every parole and breaking bail and breaking everything, I wasn't allowed to do that anymore. And so my life had become, in my mental construct, very limited to this little square, you know. I mean, you could still have a life in that square. Wasn't anywhere near as big as the one when I was a child, dreaming about going to America, places like that, you know. And so what happened was, when this thing said to me, all the doors that you thought were closed are now open. You know, there are no limitations. And this is, I must admit, this is a very difficult thing to get used to, because I'd gotten used to like being in a mindset, and yet my heart was going, hey, woo, wham, like this, you know. And it's like, whoa, you know. Anyway, long story short, it gets released, goes along the way, does some college work, and then I get a job, and then I sort the job out, managed to buy a house, I get married. It was great, you know. And then I'd met some people from America, and they'd say, hey, you must come and visit us, you know. And they give me some dates and said, why don't you come over? So I did. I went to a travel agency, bought a return ticket to New York City, and didn't go to the embassy to ask permission to get a visa, which people come from my background would probably be a wise thing to do. And then I looked at the looked at the air ticket, and it said on it, do not board the flight if you have any problems. And I certainly did have a problem because of my background. And so I just knew on another level that I was able to do anything. I was able to go anywhere. And I could certainly do this. On another level, in the mental one, if I was to believe the things that I used to believe, you can't go, can't do this, and there's why, like this, I'd be in big trouble. And if I let the record start to play in the jukebox of my past, it would start to go, oh dear, it starts to play an emotional record. But the emotional record's it's not here now, is it? It's just a record from the past. It's not supposed to direct me. It's not supposed to be my boss. You know, it's ridiculous. And so there I was, flew across, and the plane is just coming over Newfoundland in Canada to heading down into Kennedy Airport, and they give out these forms. You got to just put 5 ticks to say everything is okay, and mine had a big X in the middle. It's like, oh my God, you know. So I sort of enjoyed the trip. But now, as we were going to land, all the people on board, they're going on holiday, visiting friends, going home. There's a sort of lifting everybody, yeah, here we go, you know. And there's me going, oh, no, you know. So I started to dread the situation. I got off the plane. I was really relieved that the immigration queue was really long. And because it gave me time, because I was panicking a little bit, you know. And I thought, come on, you know. You know what you know, but the record's trying to play, and the narrative's trying to come in. But fortunately, I'd sort of put myself in a place where I couldn't get out, you know. I couldn't escape. I'd forced myself down a funnel that meant I had to confront this, you know. So anyway, fortunately, I had about 3 people to go, and suddenly I lost all fear. I felt fine. And they pointed me to one of the immigration desks. I went over, I put my paperwork on the table, sort of stood there, and the guy looks at the screen, looks at me, like this, and scratches his face, and then he's looking at me, and then he picked my piece of paper up, which said tick, tick, X, tick, tick, couldn't be more clear. And I was sort of, you know. And then he said, he stamped something, passed it over, and he shook my hand. He said, welcome to New York, sir. Enjoy your stay. Oh, my whole life went before me. Right back to when I was a boy. I wanted to go to this city. I knew I was going to go there. And I found that only my mind was going to stop me. Only the old records that playing inside was trying to say, that you're a scumbag, you're not good enough, you're not worthy enough. And it's all lies, you know. It's just a narrative that doesn't even exist. All that information doesn't exist, except it's a record that's in the jukebox of your background. And so I got away from the immigration desk as quick as I could to just breathe the air of New York outside the building, so that if they made a mistake and they sort of grabbed me back like this, at least I'd be able to say, well, at least I smelt the air. But I didn't, I had a great time. I went up to, flew up to Pittsburgh from there, and then I went over to Canada to come back. And I did the whole trip and broke through. And they're realities, I've got records, you've got records. I've got a script in me that would be only this big. And you might have a script in you that's limiting you, but they can be broken. But the only way really they can be broken is not by attacking the record itself. I can't take my record away. I can't take the past away. But I can wake up to who I really am today. And who I truly, truly am is much bigger than the limitation of that. This is not me. That you're going to write a little script and tell me this is all I can do and that's how far I can go. It's preposterous. And you're going to tell me that this is the only emotional record I can have. It's like, let's get out the violins. Oh dear, oh. You've got to stop feeling sorry for yourself.